The morning sun crawled over the steel skyline of Manhattan as Nathan Cole stood in his penthouse office, staring at the sealed envelope in his hand. It was thick, old, and marked with his father's wax stamp, something he hadn't touched since the funeral 6 days ago. Nathan, a man known for mastering the chaos of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, felt a weight he couldn't negotiate away. With trembling fingers, he broke the seal. Inside was his father's final will, a handwritten document that read more like a final mission. The words hit him hard. To inherit everything, you must marry before the 30th day of this month. Nathan's breath caught. That was in 4 days. Beneath the clause in bold were the stakes. If not, the entire estate will go to the charitable trust overseen by your cousin Damien. Nathan crumpled into the leather chair, heart pounding. He hadn't even been dating anyone. A real marriage in 4 days? Impossible. Unless. That night, as the city buzzed with life, Nathan took a drive, no chauffeur, no assistants, just him and his thoughts. He ended up in a part of the city he hadn't visited in years, lower Manhattan, where the sidewalks cracked and steam hissed from vents. That's where he saw her. A pale woman with dirty blonde hair, curled up on a flattened cardboard box, wearing a torn coat and hugging herself for warmth. Something in her eyes stopped him mid-step, eyes that once knew better days. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even speaking. Just sitting still, invisible to the world. Nathan's heart pulled. Not because he pitied her, but because somehow he saw potential in her. He didn't know her name, but he knew he'd found his answer. Nathan didn't approach her immediately. He stood across the street, arms folded, watching as city dwellers passed her without so much as a glance. The more he watched, the more he noticed the way she clenched her jaw every few seconds, the way she rubbed her wrist, as if trying to soothe an old injury, the flicker of pride hidden behind her silence. She wasn't like the others scattered along the block. She didn't ask for change. She didn't hold a sign. She just existed barely. Nathan crossed the street slowly, his expensive shoes clicking on the sidewalk. When he stopped before her, she looked up, startled. Her eyes were a stormy blue, tired but sharp. "I'm not dangerous," he said gently. She blinked and looked away. "I didn't say you were." Her voice was hoarse, as if it hadn't been used in days. He sat beside her without asking. The sidewalk was cold and damp, and his $1,000 suit absorbed the filth. She stared at him with suspicion, waiting for some con or trick. Instead, he extended his hand. "I'm Nathan. I need your help." The woman laughed dryly. "You need my help? That's rich." He didn't flinch. "I have 4 days to get married. If I don't, I lose everything." Her brows lifted. "Sounds like a soap opera. It's real, and I'm offering you a deal. A marriage. Quick, legal, with compensation. You won't owe me anything. You'll get a place to stay, money, food, whatever you need. After the deadline passes, we go our separate ways." She stared at him long and hard. "You think I'd say yes just like that?" He smiled slightly. "I'm hoping you will. What's your name?" Her lips tightened. "Lily." He nodded. "Lily, I'm serious. One signature, and your life changes." She stared at the traffic. "That's what they always say. Just one signature." Lily didn't respond right away. She shifted her weight, glanced at Nathan, then at the street again, as if the cracks in the pavement held the answers. Nathan stayed silent, letting the moment breathe. He could see the conflict in her between instinct and survival, between fear and curiosity. She finally looked at him, her gaze sharper now. "And what if I say yes and you disappear? What if it's a scam? People like you don't walk into neighborhoods like this with an angle." Nathan exhaled. "I don't blame you for being cautious. If you want, we can go straight to a courthouse tomorrow. You'll have full access to the documents. You can walk away at any time." Lily raised a brow. "What do you get out of it?" "Inheritance, control of my father's estate, and peace." She tilted her head. "That's a lot to put on a stranger." Nathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I could have picked anyone, but you looked like someone who had dignity left. Someone who wouldn't take what wasn't earned. That's rare." Lily looked down at her hands. They were rough, calloused and cold. She hadn't looked at herself in a mirror in months. "You're offering to make me your wife," she said slowly, "and I haven't even had a proper shower in weeks." Nathan's reply came softly. "None of that matters to me right now. What matters is that we're both in a situation where we need each other." Lily's eyes burned with sudden emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. Not love, not hope, just the terrifying tug of a real decision. After a long pause, she whispered, "Okay, I'll do it." Nathan nodded, not triumphantly but solemnly. "Then we start tomorrow. Clean clothes, a place to stay, and a name on a marriage license." Lily smirked faintly. "You're either the best or the dumbest billionaire alive." Nathan chuckled. "We'll find out soon enough." The next morning, Lily woke up in a bed so soft she feared she'd sink into it forever. The sheets smelled of lavender and something expensive she couldn't name. The night before had felt like a movie, Nathan escorting her into a 5-star hotel under the curious eyes of staff, her holding her coat closed, as if clinging to the last piece of her old life. He'd said nothing after check-in, only handed her a keycard and promised she'd be safe. Now, as sunlight poured through the tall windows, Lily sat up slowly, feeling the weight of reality settle in. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't some charity stunt. She was really here. On the nightstand she found a note, 9 a.m. "Room 1401. New clothes are in the wardrobe. Breakfast is waiting." Her chest tightened. She hadn't been called to anything in years, not a job, not a family dinner, not even a welfare appointment. When she arrived at room 1401, dressed in simple jeans and a clean t-shirt Nathan had left for her, she hesitated before knocking. The door opened before she touched it. Nathan stood there in a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled up, a tablet in one hand and coffee in the other. "You're right on time," he said. Lily stepped in cautiously. The room was more like a suite, elegant, modern, yet warm. On the table sat a tray of breakfast, real food, not packaged leftovers. Eggs, fruit, tea, and fresh bread. "Eat," he said, nodding toward the tray. She sat down, still unsure. As she picked at the food, Nathan scrolled through documents on his tablet. "Marriage license paperwork's ready. We'll go this afternoon." Lily paused mid-bite. "This is really happening." Nathan met her eyes. "Yes. And the moment it's done, we both walk out with what we need." Lily looked at the clean cotton sleeve on her arm. "I don't even recognize myself anymore." Nathan smiled faintly. "That's the point." The marriage bureau was colder than Lily expected, not in temperature, but in spirit. It smelled like disinfectant and tired hope. Couples filled the waiting area, some dressed in white, others in street clothes, but all with one thing in common: intention. Lily sat beside Nathan in silence, her clean clothes still feeling foreign against her skin. He looked calm, scanning a contract he'd asked his lawyer to draw up that morning. "It's just protection," he'd explained. "To make sure you're not tied to anything after this. And to give you what I promised: housing, a bank deposit, and medical care. Nothing more, nothing less." Lily had nodded. It wasn't the contract that shook her. It was the fact that someone was actually willing to put her name on paper. Her name hadn't meant anything in years. When their number was called, she followed Nathan into the room like she was walking into a courtroom. The officiant was a kind-faced woman with greying curls and reading glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She smiled politely, but her eyes lingered a little longer on Lily's plain clothes. Nathan, as always, looked like he belonged in every room. He answered questions clearly, signed without hesitation, and held out the pen to Lily when it was her turn. Her fingers trembled as she took it. This was it. A fake marriage. A business transaction. But still, something about it made her heart twist. She signed, one letter at a time, and when the officiant declared them married, the words echoed in her chest. Nathan extended his hand as if sealing a deal. She shook it. No kiss, no rings. No I do beyond the legalities. Just pen, ink, paper, and two people walking out the door into a strange new contract. As they stepped back onto the street, Lily asked quietly, "So what now?" Nathan glanced at her with a half smile. "Now, Mrs. Cole, your life changes." Nathan didn't take Lily back to the hotel. Instead, he drove her to a quiet neighborhood outside the city. It was the kind of place where the trees were older than the street signs and the air didn't smell like traffic. As the car pulled into a stone-paved driveway, Lily's jaw clenched. The house was massive, 2 stories tall with wide glass windows and ivy crawling up its white brick walls. A modern fortress. She didn't speak and Nathan didn't explain. He simply parked, stepped out, and waited as she slowly followed. "This is yours for now," he said softly. "You'll be safe here. No press, no questions." Lily stared up at the house like it might swallow her whole. "You're giving me this?" Nathan shrugged. "It's one of my properties. You're my wife now. You need a place that looks the part." Inside, the place was spotless and furnished, but lived in. There were paintings on the walls, books on the shelves, even a faint scent of vanilla in the air. It didn't feel staged. It felt like someone actually cared about this space. Lily wandered through the living room and into the kitchen. Granite countertops, double ovens. She ran her fingers along the surface as if touching gold. "You're not staying here?" she asked, turning to him. Nathan shook his head. "No, we're married on paper, but we don't need to pretend privately. I'll check in as needed for appearances, but this is your space." Lily leaned against the counter, her throat tight. "Why are you doing this, really?" Nathan paused, looking at her not as a billionaire, not as a man chasing an inheritance, but as someone genuinely unsure. "Because my father trusted me to make hard choices, and maybe you were one of them." Lily didn't respond, but for the first time in a long time she didn't feel like a burden. She felt like a choice. The house was silent by evening, save for the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of wooden floors beneath Lily's steps. She wandered the halls, every door she opened revealing more luxury than she was prepared for. Walk-in closets filled with nothing, guest rooms dressed like hotel suites, a private library with more books than she'd ever owned. But it was the bathroom that brought her to a standstill. The tub, deep and claw-footed, was perched near a wide window that framed the golden sunset. A clean towel lay neatly folded. Lily stared at her reflection in the mirror above the sink. Her hair was cleaner, her skin no longer masked by dust and grime. Yet, the eyes staring back still held the weight of old scars. She slid into the warm water and let herself sink until only her face remained above the surface. Her body relaxed, but her mind didn't. She remembered the park bench where she'd spent last winter, the man who tried to steal her shoes while she slept, the time she sold her coat just to eat. And now she was here, Mrs. Lily Cole. Fake wife of a billionaire. Living in a mansion, with no idea who she was anymore. When she got out, wrapped in the softest towel she'd ever felt, she walked into the bedroom and found something new on the bed, a journal. Inside was a note from Nathan. "No one's watching. Write what you need to." She held the pen for a long time before writing anything. Then, finally, on the first page, she scribbled 4 words. "Who am I now?" The ink bled slightly into the page, but the question stayed sharp and unanswered. The next morning, Lily stood in front of the wardrobe and stared. The entire left side had been filled overnight with new clothes still tagged, still stiff from packaging. Jeans, blouses, sweaters, even shoes lined up neatly at the bottom. She hadn't heard anyone come in, hadn't asked for any of it. And yet, it was all in her size. That was the part that unsettled her the most. Nathan had prepared everything like a man arranging a chessboard, with precision, with knowledge. She reached for a soft navy sweater and held it against her skin, then slowly changed out of the nightdress she'd been given. The fabric felt good, but unfamiliar, like wearing someone else's future. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who might be someone, but not yet. Not quite. Later that afternoon, the house phone rang. She stared at it like it was a foreign object before picking up. "Hello?" Nathan's voice came through calmly. "Hope you're settling in." She hesitated. "Trying." There was a pause. "There's a media dinner in 2 days. It's important. You'll come with me just for show. We'll make it look real." Her stomach knotted. "Real? To the public? No one needs to know the truth but us." Another pause. "A stylist will come tomorrow. Don't worry about anything." She didn't reply, so he added, Lily, you're doing better than you think. She hung up without saying goodbye. The moment felt too strange to hold. She wandered to the living room, sat on the couch, and curled her legs under her. She stared at the high ceiling and whispered, "Doing better than what?" But no one answered. Only the silence of wealth surrounded her, gently but completely. When the doorbell rang the next morning, Lily felt her chest tighten. She hadn't had visitors in years. Opening doors had always meant risk. But now, standing in a borrowed home with borrowed clothes, she took a breath and opened it anyway. The woman standing there was tall, lean, and sharply dressed in black. "I'm Mara. Nathan sent me," she said with a cool smile, rolling in a suitcase filled with fabrics and tools. "We've got a lot to do before Thursday night." Without waiting for permission, she walked in like she owned the place. Lily just nodded and stepped aside, still unsure how to play the role of a billionaire's wife, even a fake one. Mara opened the suitcase and began pulling out gowns, heels, accessories. "We need elegance, but with a backstory. You're the mysterious new wife, right? Simple, soft beauty with a touch of refinement. Understated wealth." Lily watched in silence as Mara examined her hair, her posture, even the shape of her hands. It felt invasive, like being studied. "You clean up well," Mara said finally. "Do you have any preferences?" Lily shook her head. She didn't even know what counted as a preference anymore. Everything in her life had been about survival, never luxury, never fashion. As Mara began selecting a sleek black gown with a high neckline, Lily felt herself slowly fading into a version she didn't recognize. "You don't have to be someone else," Mara said suddenly, glancing up. "Just polish who you already are." The words felt strange coming from someone so polished herself. When Mara finally packed up to leave, she handed Lily a card. "I don't ask questions, but if you ever need someone to talk to, not as a stylist, just as a woman, call me." Lily nodded and took the card, though she wasn't sure she'd ever use it. But for the first time in a long time, someone offered help without a hidden price. The black car arrived precisely at 6. Nathan stepped out looking like he belonged on a magazine cover, flawless tuxedo, cufflinks that sparkled beneath the city lights, and the calm composure of a man used to owning every room he entered. When Lily opened the door, his gaze shifted slightly. Not surprise, not admiration, just approval. She wore the black gown Mara had chosen, her hair swept into a low bun, her skin glowing softly under the hallway chandelier. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Nathan offered his arm. "Ready?" She hesitated before taking it. "Not really," he chuckled quietly. "Good. That means you'll seem human." The ride into the city was quiet. Nathan made a few calls. Lily stared out the window, watching the streets blur into light and noise. Her reflection stared back from the glass, elegant, calm, but uncertain. A stranger wearing her skin. The dinner was being held at a private venue, high above Manhattan. Crystal chandeliers. Dozens of influential guests. Cameras, handshakes, calculated laughter. Nathan guided her through it like a dance. "Smile at this one," he'd whisper. "Nod here. Say very little, but say it kindly." And she did. To her own surprise, Lily played the part. She laughed when needed. She smiled at the flash of cameras. She accepted compliments about her grace and elegance without flinching, but underneath it all she felt a growing ache. Not because of the act, but because she realized how easy it was to fall into. Somewhere between the glasses of wine and the empty flattery, she locked eyes with Nathan across the table. For the first time that night, his expression changed, just slightly. Like he saw through her performance. Like he knew the cost of pretending. And for one strange moment, Lily wondered if this whole thing, this fake marriage, this borrowed life might be changing him too. After the dinner, the car ride back was silent again, but this time, the silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, almost thoughtful. Lily kept her eyes on the road ahead, but she could feel Nathan glance at her a few times. Finally he spoke. "You handled tonight better than some trained socialites," she smirked faintly. "Is that a compliment or an observation?" He chuckled. "Both." A pause. Then, softer, "I meant it." Lily nodded, then leaned back against the seat. "How do you do this every day?" The pretending, the smiling, the answering questions you didn't ask for. Nathan looked out the window. You stop noticing after a while. It just becomes armor. She studied him for a moment. You're different when you're not around them. Them? He asked. People who expect you to be something. Back at the house, Nathan walked her to the door, an unspoken ritual forming between them. As she reached for the handle, she turned back. What was your father really like? Nathan looked at her, surprised by the question. He sighed. Complicated. Brilliant. Cold. He believed legacy was everything. Even love had to serve purpose. Lily nodded slowly. And you? I believed him for a long time, Nathan said. Until recently. There was a pause. You've changed the pace of everything, Lily. And I don't think I expected that. She didn't know how to respond, so she just said, Good night. He nodded and walked away. But even as she entered the house, she knew something had shifted. Not just between them, but inside her too. She wasn't just part of his plan anymore. Somehow, without meaning to, she was becoming part of his story. The next morning, Lily sat at the kitchen counter, staring at a bowl of fruit she didn't have the appetite for. The house was quiet, but her thoughts weren't. After everything, the marriage, the dinner, the silence, she was beginning to feel the weight of a strange truth. She wasn't pretending to fit into Nathan's world anymore. She was adapting to it. Too quickly. Too easily. She still didn't have a job, a plan, or anyone outside of Nathan who knew she existed. She touched the edge of her wedding band, a thin gold ring Nathan had insisted on before the dinner. For show, he'd said. But the longer she wore it, the more real it felt. Not romantic. Just binding. Like a chain, polished and polite. That afternoon, she walked into the upstairs study Nathan had shown her on the first day but never entered. It smelled like old books and quiet ambition. On the desk sat a photo in a brass frame, Nathan and his father. They stood stiffly, like two men holding power instead of affection. She picked it up and stared, trying to understand the coldness in both their eyes. I see you found him. Nathan's voice came from behind. She turned, startled. He leaned against the doorway, no tie, sleeves rolled. That was taken the year I turned 21. He made me sign my first company contract on that birthday. Lily blinked. No cake? No time. He stepped closer, tone quiet. He told me legacy comes before love. I believed that once. Lily looked down at the photo again. And now, Nathan exhaled. Now I'm married to a woman I barely know, trying to fulfill a will that never asked what I actually wanted. Lily looked up at him, her voice steady. Maybe it's time you ask yourself what that is. He didn't reply. But he didn't walk away either. 2 days later, Lily's name appeared in the business gossip column of a major online blog. Mystery woman marries billionaire Nathan Cole in private ceremony. She found it while scrolling through her phone, a habit she'd picked up recently, trying to stay connected to a world she had once lived far outside of. The article had no real photos of her, just guesses, speculation, and one blurry picture from the media dinner. But the comments were worse. People called her a gold digger, a social climber, a hidden heiress, and worse. She stared at the screen as the words sank into her skin like acid. She knew the marriage wasn't real. She knew she wasn't pretending to be someone's dream wife. But still, being judged for a role she didn't audition for hit her harder than she expected. When Nathan came by that evening, she didn't hide the article. She held it out to him, eyes sharp. This is what you meant by appearances. He read the headline, then scrolled through a few comments. I knew something would come out eventually, he said. They always sniff out stories. And you weren't going to warn me, she asked. What would I have said? Brace yourself for the internet. It's not something you can prepare for, Lily. She stared at him, unsure if she was angry or just disappointed. They're making up who I am. Nathan looked at her carefully. Then let them. What matters is that you know who you are. Do I? She snapped. Because lately I'm not sure anymore. He sighed and sat down beside her. You're more than what they see. But only you get to decide if you believe that. She looked away, her chest tight. She wasn't sure what stung more, the headlines, or how much she'd started caring about them. That weekend, Lily began taking morning walks through the garden behind the house. It became her new routine, one of the few things that felt real. She liked the silence, the symmetry of trimmed hedges, and the way the sun caught on the fountain in the middle. It gave her space to think, to breathe. But on Sunday morning, her peace was interrupted. A loud buzz echoed through the house's intercom system. Someone was at the front gate. She walked to the screen in the hallway and saw a man in a blazer standing just outside the iron bars, holding a phone and wearing a smug smile. She didn't recognize him, but something about his posture screamed trouble. A few seconds later, Nathan called. "Don't open the gate," he said firmly. "That's Damien, my cousin." Lily blinked. "The one who gets everything if you don't marry." "The same. And he knows I did." "Then why is he here?" There was a pause. "Because he doesn't believe I did it for the right reasons." Lily looked at the screen again. Damien hadn't moved. He seemed to be speaking into his phone now, occasionally glancing at the camera like he knew she was watching. "He wants to catch us slipping," Nathan said. "He'll dig, he'll poke, and he'll wait for something to fall apart." "And if it does?" Lily asked softly. "He wins," Nathan replied. "Not just the estate. Everything." Lily stared at Damien's image until it disappeared. He had turned away, finally giving up for now, but the unease lingered. This marriage was supposed to be a transaction, a quiet deal. Now, with Damien sniffing around and the media whispering, it was turning into a stage, and Lily hated being the star of a performance she never auditioned for. Lily sat at the edge of the kitchen island, stirring her coffee in slow, aimless circles. The conversation with Nathan from earlier still echoed in her mind. Damien, the inheritance, the stakes. And worst of all, how deep she was now tangled in a world that didn't belong to her. She had gone from invisible to watched, from faceless to headline, and all of it without knowing who she was becoming in the process. The door opened quietly behind her. She didn't have to turn to know it was Nathan. His footsteps were always calm, measured, never rushed. "You didn't sleep," he said softly. Lily didn't look up. Hard to sleep when the floor might disappear under you. He stepped beside her, leaning on the counter with his arms folded. "You're not in danger." She finally looked at him. "A man who wants your fortune came to your gate. That feels like danger to me." Nathan nodded, accepting the truth in her tone. "He's watching, but that doesn't mean we're losing." "We?" she echoed. "You still see this as a partnership?" "I do," he said quietly, "even if it's not the kind we expected." She searched his face for signs of performance, but what she saw instead was something that unsettled her more: sincerity. She took a slow sip from her cup, then set it down. "You know, I wasn't supposed to be part of any of this. I had plans once, simple ones, a job, a one-bedroom place, enough to feel like I mattered." Nathan looked at her, not with pity, but with something closer to respect. "You still matter. And when this is done, if you want to walk away, I'll make sure you have the foundation to start again." Lily looked away, not ready to admit that part of her didn't want to walk away anymore, not just from the house, but from him. By midweek, the pressure had built to a breaking point. Lily felt it in the way the staff whispered around corners, in how the phone rang more than usual, and in how Nathan seemed to wear exhaustion like a second suit. Damien had been sending letters through lawyers, claiming suspicion, requesting evidence of a legitimate marriage. Public records weren't enough. He wanted photos, receipts, proof that Lily wasn't just a name tacked onto a scheme. And through it all, Nathan was calm. Too calm. That frightened Lily more than any threat Damien could pose. Because Nathan wasn't a man who panicked, but he was a man who calculated. And Lily began to wonder how long until she became one of those calculations. The thought haunted her into the early hours of the next morning, so much so that, when the first light broke over the garden, she packed a small tote bag, wrapped her hair in a scarf, and slipped out the back gate. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to breathe outside of Nathan's shadow. She took a cab to a quieter part of the city, where no one knew her name or cared if she wore designer shoes. She walked through thrift stores, bookstores, and a small park bench where she ate a sandwich in peace. For the first time in weeks, she felt human again. Not a project. Not a secret. Not a missus attached to a legal document. Just Lily. But back at the house, Nathan was pacing. Security had noticed her absence, and the gate log confirmed she hadn't been taken. She had left. Voluntarily. When he found her phone still charging on the nightstand, a strange panic settled in his chest. She'd left him nothing. No message, no warning. And for a man who was used to control, that kind of silence was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. Nathan cancelled every meeting that morning. His assistant had never heard his voice so clipped, so sharp. He barked orders to security, contacted every driver under his employ, and pulled up every camera feed connected to the surrounding streets. But nothing. Lily had vanished with the kind of precision he hadn't expected from someone who once had nowhere to go. That realization unsettled him more than he'd ever admit. Not just because it proved she was capable, but because it meant she'd wanted to leave. And Nathan didn't know why. He stood in the hallway where her scarf used to hang, staring at the empty hook like it held answers. What had he missed? Had he pushed her too hard into a life she didn't want? Or worse, had he made her feel like she was only useful for his gain? Hours passed. Still no word. He sat in the library where she once asked about his father. The air felt heavier now, the silence more punishing. Nathan was not a man who worried about people. People worried about him. But this was different. Lily wasn't just a name or a transaction. She had become a variable he couldn't control and deep down someone he didn't want to lose. Finally, sometime after sunset, his phone buzzed. One of his drivers texted a location, a modest neighborhood near the edge of the city. No photos. No questions. Just a quiet confirmation. Nathan didn't tell anyone where he was going. He grabbed his keys himself, slid into the driver's seat of his car, and drove into the night. And the whole way there, one question rang louder than the rest. If she was safe, would she still want to come back? Lily sat on a low brick wall outside a corner cafe, her tote bag resting at her feet. She'd bought herself a hot tea and an old paperback novel from a second-hand shop. For hours she simply watched people pass, real people, normal people. She didn't miss the mansion. She didn't miss the designer clothes or the uncomfortable silence of wealth. But Nathan, that was different. He lingered in her thoughts like a song she couldn't switch off. His voice, his unexpected kindness, his eyes when he let his guard down. She hadn't run away from him, she had run from the idea of him. From the weight of what she might be becoming. A woman who needed someone like Nathan to define her worth. And that scared her more than anything. When the black car finally pulled up beside the curb, Lily didn't flinch. She knew it was him before the engine even quieted. Nathan stepped out, not in a suit, not looking like a billionaire, just a man in a grey shirt and tired eyes. He didn't rush. He didn't demand. He just stood a few steps away. "You're okay," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Lily nodded. "I needed to breathe." "I figured," he replied. "That's why I waited before coming." She looked at him, her voice calm. "You thought I was running?" He shook his head. "No, I thought you were remembering who you were before this started." There was a pause. "I didn't want you to disappear, but I didn't want to keep you in something that felt like a cage, either." Lily lowered her gaze. "It never felt like a cage. It just didn't feel like me anymore." Nathan stepped closer. "Then come back and help us figure out who you really are. On your terms." It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a bribe. It was an invitation. And it was the first thing in days that felt honest enough to trust. Back at the house, the air felt different. Not colder, just quieter. Lily walked through the front door and paused as if crossing a threshold that required something more than just footsteps. Nathan didn't follow her too closely. He gave her space, staying behind with his hands in his pockets, watching her, as if she might disappear again if he moved too fast. She walked into the living room and sat, not on the edge like a guest, but fully like someone who might be ready to stay. "I didn't leave because of you," she said softly. "I left because I needed to know if I still had a choice." Nathan nodded slowly. "And do you?" She met his gaze. "I think I do now." He walked over and sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his expression more serious than she'd seen before. "This started as a deal," he said. "A signature, a timeline, a goal. But it's not just that anymore. Not for me. She inhaled, unsure of what she wanted him to say next. "And not just because of the inheritance?" she asked. "No," he said firmly, "because you made me remember that people can change, that I can change. And that legacy means nothing if I don't feel proud of who I am when I get it." Lily folded her arms across her chest. "So what does that mean for us?" Nathan leaned forward. "It means the deal's over if you want it to be. You're not bound to this anymore. You never were, not really." Lily looked down at her hands, then back at him. "Then let's rewrite it. Together. On new terms." Nathan smiled faintly. "What kind of terms?" She shrugged, the corners of her mouth curving just slightly. "One where I'm not your fake wife. I'm just Lily. And maybe you let that be enough for a while." Nathan nodded. "That sounds like the kind of deal I'd be lucky to make." For the first time since the wedding, Lily slept through the night. No tossing, no waking up to old instincts of watching her surroundings. Just peace. When she woke, the house was unusually quiet. She wrapped herself in a robe and padded down the hallway toward the kitchen, but stopped short when she heard voices. Heated ones. Nathan and another man. She stepped closer, hidden by the wall, heart racing. "You think changing the terms will protect you?" The man hissed. "Damien." His voice was sharper than before. "You signed the marriage certificate. But now your wife is playing house in a way that smells fake." Nathan's voice stayed even. "Back off, Damien. You don't get to dictate my marriage. I get to challenge the will." "And I will," Damien snapped. "I already filed the paperwork this morning. Unless you can provide documented proof of a real relationship, not a contract, you're out. And I take everything." Lily's breath caught. This wasn't just a game anymore. Damien wasn't throwing idle threats. He was moving. Fast. And Nathan had known. He was trying to protect her from it. She stepped into the room, ignoring their startled looks. "Then we give him what he wants," she said, her voice calm. Nathan turned. "Lily, no, yes," she cut in. "I'm not hiding. You need proof. We'll give him proof. You want to see a real marriage, Damien? Fine. But don't forget I was surviving long before I ever knew your cousin. If you want to fight, you'd better be ready to lose." Damien laughed, but the flicker of unease in his eyes didn't go unnoticed. "Careful," he said, stepping closer to her. "You're not the only one with secrets, Mrs. Cole." Then he left. The door slammed shut. Nathan looked at her, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." Lily met his gaze. "Yes, I did. This time I'm not running. I'm fighting with you." Later that evening, Lily sat across from Nathan in his office. The heavy tension in the room had finally given way to focus. They weren't just reacting anymore, they were planning. Nathan's legal team had been briefed, publicists were working on press statements, and a new PR narrative was forming, not a secretive elopement, but a whirlwind love story born in unexpected places. Lily hated how clean it sounded, but for once she understood the purpose behind the fiction. It wasn't just about optics, it was survival. "We'll need interviews," Nathan said, flipping through a strategy packet. "Public appearances, maybe a feature spread in one of the lifestyle magazines." Lily raised a brow. "A photo shoot." He smiled faintly. "One where you don't disappear halfway through." She leaned back in her chair. "So now I have to learn how to be a wife and a public figure." "You've already done the hard part," he said. "You stayed." She stared at him, then softened. "What about Damien? What if he digs deeper?" Nathan exhaled. "He will. That's what he does. He's not afraid to play dirty." Lily hesitated. "Then maybe it's time I stop being afraid of my past." He looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if he tries to drag me down with my old life, I won't let him. I'm not ashamed of who I was. Homeless. Alone. Fighting every day. If he thinks that's a weakness, then he doesn't know me at all." Nathan's eyes didn't leave hers. For the first time, she saw more than admiration in his gaze. There was something deeper, maybe pride, maybe respect. "Then we fight smart," he said. "And we fight together." She nodded slowly. Together. And for the first time since their wedding day, the word felt real. The following week unfolded like a whirlwind. Lily found herself at photo shoots, sitting for interviews, and attending curated events where every smile was rehearsed and every glance was watched. But something surprising happened. She got better at it. Not just at pretending, but at being. Being present. Being proud. Being unapologetically herself. When reporters asked about her past, she didn't flinch. Yes, I was homeless. Yes, I slept on the streets. But that doesn't define my worth, it just proves my strength. Her honesty shocked people. It silenced the rumors faster than Nathan's PR team ever could. And behind the scenes, Nathan watched with awe. The woman he married as a solution had become his shield, his partner, and quietly his inspiration. One afternoon, as they prepared for a charity gala, Lily stood in front of a mirror wearing a gold evening dress. She looked regal, unrecognizable from the girl curled up on cardboard in the cold. Nathan entered the room, paused when he saw her, and let the silence stretch. "You look like someone who owns every room she walks into," he said. Lily smiled softly. "Funny. I was just thinking I look like someone who finally remembers who she is." He walked over slowly. "You've changed everything," he said. "Not just the narrative, Lily. You changed me." She met his gaze. "Then maybe we both got more than we bargained for." For a moment, the air between them felt still charged. He took her hand gently, then leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "Let's finish this story on our own terms." And she nodded, not as a woman caught in someone else's plan, but as a woman ready to write the rest of her story with him. The night of the gala was perfect on the surface. Flashbulbs, polished speeches, elegant gowns, and the buzz of wealth. Lily stood beside Nathan with confidence that had taken root deep inside her, no longer just surviving. She was seen now, and not just because of him, because of herself, but as they moved through the crowd, she caught a glimpse of someone near the entrance. A face she hadn't seen in over 2 years. Her blood went cold. It was Derek, from the streets. A man she once trusted. Once loved. The man who stole the last of her money when she needed food most. He hadn't changed much, same wiry frame, same eyes that always searched for the next angle. He spotted her and froze. Lily stiffened. Nathan noticed instantly. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Someone I used to know," she replied, voice tight. "Before all this." Derek approached slowly, hands up like he meant no harm. "Lily," he said. "Didn't expect to see you here. Damn, you clean up nice." Nathan stepped in front of her protectively, but Lily held her ground. "What do you want, Derek?" He chuckled nervously. "Just saying hello. No hard feelings, right?" Lily stared at him, something firm rising in her chest. "You left me hungry in winter with nothing but a lie. You don't get to show up now that I'm glowing and expect a smile." Derek shifted awkwardly. "Didn't know you'd land a billionaire. Thought maybe you'd—" Lily interrupted. "Be dead? Forgotten?" Her voice didn't rise, but the truth in it cut sharp. "I lived. I fought. And I don't owe you a single piece of that victory." Nathan placed a hand on her back, proud. Derek slunk away, vanishing into the crowd. Lily turned to Nathan. "I didn't run this time." Nathan nodded. "No, you didn't. You stood like someone who knows she belongs here." And she did. The following morning, Nathan received the call they'd both been waiting for. The lawyers confirmed it. Damien's challenge had been thrown out. The marriage had been deemed valid not just legally, but emotionally, based on interviews, timelines, public appearances, and statements given voluntarily by Lily herself. "The board sees no evidence of fraud," the voice on the other end had said. "You retain full rights to your father's estate." Nathan thanked them and ended the call. Then he turned to Lily, who was sitting across the room with a warm cup of tea in her hands, waiting not with fear, but with calm curiosity. "It's over," he said. "You saved it. All of it." She smiled slightly. "Then I guess the contract's fulfilled." Nathan walked over and sat beside her. "You know, when this started, I thought you were a placeholder. A solution. And I didn't ask who you were. I didn't really care." "I know," she said, not bitterly, just truthfully. "But now," he continued, "I can't imagine any of this making sense without you." Lily looked down at her tea. "What happens next?" Nathan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the original agreement they'd both signed. It was folded neatly. Without a word, he tore it in half and dropped it into the fireplace. The paper curled and blackened, disappearing in seconds. "That chapter's done," he said. "No more conditions. No more contracts." Lily looked up slowly. "Then what are we now?" Nathan reached for her hand. "Anything we want to be." And for once, neither of them had anything to prove. No one to convince. No deadline to beat. Just a future wide open and entirely theirs. The morning sun bathed the living room in gold, the soft kind of light that made the world feel brand new. Lily stood by the window, watching the city stretch into day. It had been 2 months since the inheritance had been secured, the headlines had calmed, and the lawyers had disappeared. Life had slowed to something almost peaceful, but inside her, something else stirred, a truth she hadn't spoken yet. Nathan entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You always wake up before the world," he said, handing her one. She smiled. Old habit. They stood together in silence for a moment before she turned to face him fully. "Nathan, there's something I haven't told you." He looked at her, concern beginning to surface. "Okay," she took a deep breath. "When I first met you, I wasn't just a woman on the street. I was running from something. Someone. A mistake that almost ruined me. I wasn't just poor, I was hiding." Nathan's brows furrowed, but he stayed quiet. She continued, "I had a different name back then. Lily wasn't what I was born with. I changed it after everything went wrong. I never thought I'd be found again. But I wanted you to know who you really married." Nathan stepped closer, his voice steady. "So, tell me, what's your real name?" She met his eyes. "Amelia Grace West. I used to be a journalist. I exposed something I wasn't supposed to, and they destroyed my life for it." He stared at her, not with judgment, but with dawning realization. "You're the one from the Grayson Pharmaceuticals case, the whistleblower who vanished." She nodded. "That was me." Nathan's voice softened. "You didn't lose your name, Amelia. You protected your truth. And now you've found someone who believes in it." She smiled through tears. "So, where do we go from here?" Nathan reached for her hand. "Forward, with no secrets. No contracts. Just us." And in that quiet morning, with truth on the table and love finally unchained from obligation, Amelia no longer just Lily knew that she hadn't just survived the past. She had reclaimed her future. If you enjoyed this powerful transformation story, make sure to subscribe for more emotional and unexpected billionaire love stories only on Fated Heart Stories. New stories drop every day.